The latest revisionist ideas is that, well, the planned economy was a disaster, Russia was a disaster. The Soviet Union never achieved anything. Oh, really? They never achieved anything, good heavens above. Look, I've already said Russia in 1970, Tsarist Russia in 1917 was an extremely backward country, more backward than Pakistan at the present time, okay? The population, the mass of the population were illiterate. The situation was a complete disaster. There was very little industrial development. What little development there was entirely dependent on foreign capital. What's the position? Well, you know, despite everything that can be said about the Soviet Union, it proved one thing, and that's why they can't forgive it. That explains the hostility which they have. The Soviet Union, for all its faults, for all the problems that undoubtedly did exist, product of backwardness, nevertheless, proved one thing without a shadow of doubt. It proved that it is possible to run a successful economy in a vast country of 150 million people without capitalists, without bankers, without stock exchanges, without speculators, and without landlords. Oh yes, oh yes. It proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt. The planned economy in the Soviet Union, the nationalized planned economy instituted by the Bolsheviks, despite all the bureaucracy and the problems created by Stalinism after the revolution, after the death of Lenin, nevertheless, doesn't matter. The Soviet Union was transformed in a remarkably short space of time from an extremely backward semi-feudal country to one of the most advanced industrial nations on earth. Oh yes. The planned economy, by the way, had a growth rate. This is astonishing. The first 5-year plans, it's true they set out from a very low base, I will accept that, but nevertheless, it doesn't change the substance of the argument. Every year in the first 5-year plans, the Soviet Union had a rate of growth of 20%. I mean, this is staggering if you consider now that if Britain or America gets 1 or 1.5%, they're in ecstasy. The stock exchange soars. The Soviet Union, my friends, had, in the first 5-year plans, had a rate of growth of approximately 20% per annum with full employment. There never was any unemployment in the Soviet Union. Unemployment, as a matter of fact, was a criminal offence. It was considered to be parasitism. No unemployment, no inflation, at least after the initial period, but they did make some mistakes, but they solved the question of inflation. Prices were stable. Rents were virtually non-existent in the Soviet Union. When I was studying there in 1970, it's true that the housing was pretty basic. There were small flats and so on. Yes, but you compare that to the monstrosity of mass homelessness. Thousands of people sleeping on the streets of London in the year of our Lord 2017. There was none of that in Russia. When I was there, hardly any rents. The rents were extremely low, virtually non-existent, and they included free gas, electricity, and even telephone calls in the Moscow region was free when I was there. There's nothing. What about health? In Tsarist Russia, if a peasant fell ill, he would die for lack of medical attention, of course. Under the Soviet Union, they built one of the finest and most advanced health services on earth, with a mass of doctors, many of them women, by the way. That's another one of the gains of the Russian Revolution. Before the Revolution, women in Russia were enslaved to the men, had no rights. The husband had the legal right to beat and torture his wife, and nothing could be done about it. All that was finished by Bolshevism, which created genuine freedom and emancipation and complete equality for women. Huge amount of women entered the professions in the Soviet Union. Doctors, teachers, university lecturers, agronomists, you name it. These were gigantic gains. Now, of course, all the lies, and there's a torrent of lies to minimize and to deny this, it's complete nonsense. Let me just quote one example, which is self-evident. The space program in the Soviet Union. The Soviet space program, it's proven even recently by the CIA, of all people, that even when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Soviet Union had, by the way, they had more scientists and engineers and technicians than America, Britain, France, Germany, and Japan combined. And they were damn good scientists. No doubt about it. The space program proves the point. The CIA admits that even in the 1980s, the Soviet space program was 10 years in advance of the USA. They tried to disguise the fact by putting a man on the moon for all that was worth and so on and so forth, but that was just propaganda. The Soviet program was infinitely in advance. I can prove it very simply. If you just look at the television news and you see, for example, they put a British man into space and so on, yes, in a Russian spaceship, in a Soyuz space capsule. Even at the present time, despite the collapse of the Soviet Union, they still have to use Russian rockets and Russian space stations in order to carry out the space program.